Our web pages should be web pages that don't just display information, but that also let users interact with that information in some way. For example, you might imagine that on Google's home page, for example, it's not just unchanging. There's a field where I can type something in. And anytime users can provide input to a web page, we generally call that a form, or some place where a user can fill out a form in order to provide information to the web page. And so now, let's take a look at how we can use HTML in order to create a form that's going to display some information. So I'll go ahead and create a new page called form.html, again using that same HTML as before. We'll call the page form. And inside of the body of this page now, let's say that I want to create a form that gives the user an opportunity to provide their full name, for example. How do I do that? Well, the first thing I need is a form element, some way of saying, here is going to be a form. And now, inside of that form, what are the various different parts of the form? Well, there's really two parts that you might imagine to this form. One is a place for the user to actually type in their name. And they probably also need some way to submit the form, some button that just says submit, such that they can click on that button in order to submit the form. So how would we do that? Well, in order to create an input field, we're going to use an input tag, whose type in this case is going to be text. There are a number of different ways that users might provide input to a form. They might type in text. They might choose from a drop-down menu. They might choose from a radio button option. Or they might provide input as by clicking on a button, for example. In this case, we're specifically using the type attribute to say that when the user is providing input in this way, the type of input that they're providing is going to be some kind of text. Then, we might provide a placeholder, some default text that's going to be inside of that input field the first time the user looks at the page. So, for example, the placeholder might be full name. That way the user knows that what they should type into this placeholder is their own full name. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and give a name to this input field. Now, this isn't going to be something that the user sees when they visit the page. But anytime you submit a form, when we receive that form in our web application, something we'll explore later on, we need some way of knowing which input field corresponded to which value. And so we're going to name each of the input fields just so that later on we'll be able to reference them. And for now, since the user is typing their full name here, we could just name this full name. Or we could more succinctly just say name as the name of this input field. After that, we have an input field where the user can type in their name. And now, we need some way for the user to be able to submit this form. So we might say something like input type equals submit to say, here's a way for the user to submit the form, type equals submit means. This is how they're going to submit the form when they're done completing it. Now, if I open up form.html, this is the page that we're ultimately going to see when we load this HTML. This entire page just contains a single HTML form. But that HTML form contains two parts. The first part was this input element here that allowed an opportunity for the user to type in their full name. They type in their full name into this input field. And when they're done, they can click this submit button to indicate that they would like to now submit this form. Of course, right now, this form isn't going to do anything when we type in our name and click submit, because we haven't added a logic in order to handle this form. But later on, as we transition into the world of building web applications using Python, we'll see how we can design a form such that after the user submits it, we save information to a database or display some sort of results back to the user, all by using the power of building these web applications and connecting them to these sorts of HTML forms. In the next video we will look at how the form get quite a bit more complex with more of the elements, and we'll take a look at another example. Thank you.